Welcome to this video, and thank you for joining me today. I want to start by acknowledging something that we've all experienced at one point or another in life. There are times when we feel like our lives are falling apart and we can't find any meaning in what we're going through. It can feel like everything is falling down around us and we wonder why we're facing these difficulties, or if there's even any purpose behind the pain or confusion we're feeling. Have you ever found yourself in a place where nothing seems to make sense and you're questioning where God is in all of it? Have you ever felt like everything around you has lost meaning, as if there's no direction in life anymore? At times it can seem like the world is spinning out of control and we just don't know what the next step should be. Maybe we're facing a challenge at work, struggling with relationships, or dealing with a personal loss. The weight of these situations can leave us feeling hopeless, unsure of what's next, or even if there's a purpose to the suffering we're enduring. How can we maintain trust in God's plan when everything seems to be falling apart? This is a question I'm sure many of us ask ourselves when we're going through a difficult time. When things feel hopeless, it's hard to keep moving forward with confidence, especially when we don't understand why we're going through it. But today we're going to explore what it means to trust in God's plan, even when everything around us feels meaningless or unclear. Trusting God's plan when things feel meaningless is not easy. In fact, it can be one of the hardest things we do because it requires a deep level of faith, trust and patience. But what I want to share with you today is that even in the midst of confusion, pain or uncertainty, God is still working in our lives, and His plan is still unfolding in ways that we may not fully understand at the moment. It's easy to get caught up in the immediate difficulties we face and feel like God is distant or silent. But through faith we can begin to recognize that God's plan isn't dependent on our ability to see it clearly at all times. His ways are higher than our ways, and His understanding far exceeds our own. In those moments of doubt and confusion, God is still with us. He is working behind the scenes, preparing us for what's next and guiding us through each step of the journey. Sometimes it's only when we look back that we can see how God was at work in our struggles and how He used those times to shape us, teach us, and bring us closer to Him. That's why trust is such an essential part of our faith. It's easy to trust when things are going well, when life feels smooth and predictable, but it's in the difficult moments, the times when everything feels uncertain or meaningless, that our trust in God's plan is truly tested. If you're in a place right now where life feels unclear, or you're struggling to see the purpose behind your current circumstances, I want to encourage you to lean into God's plan. Even when you can't see the full picture, trust that He is working and that He has a purpose for every moment, even the painful ones. And if you feel that God's path for you is becoming clearer, don't hesitate to share your thoughts with us in the comments. I would love to pray for you, and together we can walk this journey of faith knowing that God's plan is unfolding in each of our lives. If you found this video helpful, please like, share and subscribe to the channel for more videos about faith and trust in God's plan. I truly believe that by sharing these experiences and insights with one another, we can strengthen each other's faith and support each other as we continue to trust in God's perfect timing and plan for our lives. Thank you again for being here with me today, and I pray that you will feel the presence of God's peace and guidance in your life. No matter what challenges you are facing right now, may you find hope and trust in the knowledge that God is with you through every season of life. Life is full of challenges and difficulties, and at some point each of us will face moments where things seem to fall apart. These moments could include the loss of a loved one, the end of a relationship, a job loss, a health crisis, or even feeling lost and without purpose in life. Whatever the form, loss and suffering are universal experiences, and they affect us all at different stages of our journey. We don't always know why these things happen, and sometimes it feels as if everything is unraveling, leaving us feeling helpless, hopeless, and uncertain about the future. It's important to recognize that loss and suffering are inevitable parts of life. They are not something we can avoid, and they are not punishments from God, but rather aspects of living in a fallen and broken world. As human beings, we will experience heartache and pain at different points, and it's natural to wonder why these difficult moments come into our lives. When we lose someone close to us, we often ask why we have to experience grief. When we lose a job, we might wonder what went wrong or why we couldn't keep things together. When we feel insignificant or unimportant, we might search for meaning and struggle to see why we're in the place we are right now. Each of us experiences pain and loss, but what can make all the difference is how we respond to it. While it's normal to feel sadness, frustration, and confusion, we also have the opportunity to choose how we view these trials and how we allow them to shape us. The Bible teaches us that trials and suffering are not signs that God has abandoned us. Rather, they are part of His plan to help us grow in our faith and trust in Him. God is always at work, even in our most difficult moments, and through these experiences He can strengthen our character and deepen our relationship with Him. The Bible is full of stories about people who faced significant trials and yet found ways to grow through those experiences. One of the most powerful lessons we can learn is that trials and suffering are not random or meaningless. They serve a purpose, even if that purpose isn't always clear in the moment. The trials we face are often opportunities for us to deepen our trust in God and strengthen our faith. When life is easy, we might not feel the need to rely on God as much, but when we face challenges, we are drawn closer to Him, and we begin to realize just how much we need His guidance, strength, and love. In Romans 5:3-4, we are reminded that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. This process is part of God's plan for us. Even though we may not understand the reasons behind our suffering, we can trust that God is using it to shape us and help us become the people He has created us to be. God is with us through every trial, and He promises to never leave us or forsake us no matter how difficult life may get. We might not always understand why we go through certain hardships, but we can find comfort in knowing that these challenges are a part of God's plan for us. He doesn't cause suffering, but He allows it to help us grow spiritually and emotionally, just as a gardener prunes a plant to make it grow stronger. God allows challenges in our lives to prune and refine our character so that we can become more like Christ and fulfill the purpose He has for us. One of the most powerful examples in the Bible of someone who experienced tremendous loss and suffering is Job. Job was a man who had everything: wealth, family, health, and status, but he lost it all in a series of devastating events. He lost his wealth, his children, his health, and the support of his friends and family. At his lowest point, Job was in utter despair. He was questioning why he was suffering and whether he had been forsaken by God. His friends even accused him of wrongdoing, suggesting that his suffering was a punishment for sin. But Job, despite his confusion and pain, never lost his trust in God. He knew that God was still in control, even when everything around him seemed to be falling apart. In the midst of his suffering, Job cried out to God and wrestled with his emotions and doubts. But even in his pain, he maintained his faith, saying in Job 13:15, "Though he slay me, yet will I hope in him." Job acknowledged that even if he didn't understand why he was suffering, he would continue to trust in God's plan for his life. Job's perseverance and trust in God were ultimately rewarded. When the time was right, God restored everything Job had lost, blessing him with even more than he had before. His faith was tested and refined through his suffering, and in the end, God honored his trust and restored his life in abundance. The story of Job is a powerful reminder that suffering is not meaningless, and it is not the end of the story. Job's faith through his trials is an example for us all. When we face hardship and loss, we may not understand why it's happening or how we will make it through, but we can trust that God is still in control and that He is working through our suffering to bring about something good in our lives. When we go through the hardest times in life, it can feel like we're walking through a dark valley where we can't see the way forward, but in those moments we can remember that God never abandons us. His presence is with us even when we don't feel it or understand it. His plan is still unfolding even when everything seems meaningless or out of control. The difficulties we face are part of His greater purpose, and while it's hard to see that in the moment, we can trust that He is using them to shape us and guide us towards something better. If you're currently facing a loss or a difficult situation, I want to encourage you to lean into God's plan for your life. Remember that you are not alone in your suffering. God is with you, and He will help you through this time. He is always working, even when we can't see the bigger picture. In our darkest times, we can hold on to the truth that God's love and purpose for us never fail. When you feel overwhelmed by life's challenges, take a moment to remember that your pain is not without purpose. God is at work, and through your trials, you are being shaped into a person who can fulfill His plan for your life. Trust in Him and know that He is faithful to carry you through. Remember the story of Job and how despite his suffering, God restored him and blessed him beyond what he had before. Job's journey teaches us that there is purpose in the pain and that God's plan is always greater than our understanding. In our darkest times, we can find comfort in knowing that God is with us even when we don't understand why we're facing certain difficulties. The challenges we face are a part of God's perfect plan for our lives, and through them we grow stronger in faith and trust in Him. As you navigate your own journey, know that God is always working behind the scenes, refining and shaping you for the purpose He has set before you. There are times in life when we experience confusion, pain, or difficulty, and it's hard to make sense of it all. We find ourselves asking why things are happening the way they are, and it's easy to feel like we are walking through life with no understanding of what's going on. Sometimes we face challenges that seem unfair, or we encounter situations where we feel like we've been left alone, abandoned by the very God we believe in. It's in these moments that trusting God's plan becomes particularly difficult. The path doesn't seem clear, and it's hard to see how any of it could be part of a greater purpose. But the truth is, trusting God even when we don't understand why things happen is an essential part of our faith journey. Trusting God even when we don't understand why things are happening requires what some people might call blind faith. Faith that doesn't rely on what we can see, understand, or control. Faith that chooses to trust God's wisdom and His perfect timing, even when we don't have all the answers. It's easy to trust when things are going well, when life feels stable, and when we can see the next step in front of us. But true trust in God is built in the moments when we cannot see what's ahead, and when the road is filled with uncertainty and hardship. When we experience loss, pain, or disappointment, it's natural to want answers. We might feel frustrated or angry because we can't understand why these things are happening. Why did I lose my job? Why did I lose a loved one? Why am I struggling in this way? God, where are you, and why aren't you helping me? In these moments, it can feel as though God is silent or distant, but the reality is, God's plan is much bigger than we can comprehend. His ways are not our ways, and His timing is perfect even when it doesn't make sense to us. It's in the trials and the struggles that God often works the most in our lives. We may not see it at the time, but those difficult moments are often meant to deepen our trust in Him and shape us into the people we are meant to be. God does not waste our pain, but uses it to refine us, to strengthen our faith, and to help us grow closer to Him. It's through the hardships that we learn to trust God in a way that we never could when everything is going smoothly. Sometimes we don't understand why something happens, but we can trust that God has a bigger purpose even if we can't see it right now. One of the most powerful examples of trusting God even when we don't understand why is the story of Joseph in the Bible. Joseph's life was filled with hardship and difficulty, yet through it all he chose to trust in God's plan for his life. Joseph was born into a family of 12 brothers, and he was his father's favourite. This caused great jealousy among his brothers, and they plotted to get rid of him. They sold him into slavery, and Joseph was taken to Egypt, far from his family and everything he had known. Joseph faced many trials in Egypt. He was falsely accused of a crime and thrown into prison despite his innocence. For years, Joseph endured hardship and suffering, and throughout all of it, he did not understand why these things were happening to him. He could have become bitter angry or lost faith in God, but instead, Joseph chose to trust God even when the road ahead seemed uncertain. He continued to serve with integrity, even in prison, and trusted that God would eventually bring good from his situation. As time went on, Joseph's circumstances changed. He interpreted a dream for Pharaoh, which led to his promotion to a position of power in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh himself. Joseph was able to store up grain during years of plenty, which would later save Egypt and surrounding nations from famine. In a powerful turn of events, Joseph's brothers came to Egypt to buy food during the famine, and they did not recognize him. At this moment, Joseph had the opportunity to take revenge on his brothers for what they had done to him, but instead he forgave them and acknowledged that it was God's plan all along to use his suffering to save his family and many others. Joseph's story shows us the power of trusting in God's plan. Even when we don't understand why we are going through certain experiences, Joseph had no idea when he was sold into slavery that God was preparing him for a position of influence that would allow him to save his family from famine. His suffering had a purpose even when it didn't make sense at the time. It was through his trials that Joseph was prepared to fulfill God's greater plan. Joseph's response to his hardships is a testament to the power of faith in the midst of confusion. When he was reunited with his brothers, he said in Genesis 50:20, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph trusted that God's plan was bigger than his pain, and he could see in hindsight how God had used his suffering for a greater good. He didn't have the full picture when he was going through his trials, but he trusted God through it all, knowing that God had a purpose for his life. So what does it mean to trust in God's plan when we don't understand why things are happening? Trusting God is not based on what we can see or understand, but on believing in his goodness, wisdom, and perfect timing. It's easy to trust when we see the outcome, but true trust is about relying on God even when we don't know how everything will work out. Trusting God means knowing that his plan is good, even when we can't see it clearly in the moment. In Proverbs 3:5-6 we are reminded, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your paths straight." Trusting God means choosing to rely on him, not on our own understanding or logic. We may not understand the reasons behind our struggles, but we can trust that God is at work and he's leading us towards something good, even if we can't see it yet. God's plan for us is always perfect, even when it doesn't make sense to us at the time. We might find ourselves in a situation where everything seems bleak and we don't know why we're facing certain challenges, but we can hold on to the truth that God has a purpose for our lives and he is using every experience, even the painful ones, to fulfill that purpose. Trusting God is about believing that he is always at work in our lives, even when we can't see the bigger picture. The key to trusting in God's plan is patience and faith. We have to be willing to wait for his timing and trust that he is working behind the scenes, even when it feels like nothing is happening. God's plan will unfold in his perfect timings, and we can have confidence that he is leading us toward a future that is far greater than anything we can imagine. When we face difficult moments in life, we may not always understand why we're going through them, but we can trust that God is with us and he has a purpose for everything we experience. Joseph's story is a powerful reminder that even when we don't understand the why behind our struggles, we can trust that God is at work in our lives. His plan is bigger than our pain, and in time, we will see how he used our struggles for something greater. The key is to keep trusting in him even when the road ahead is unclear, knowing that God is always at work for our good and his glory. Life can sometimes feel like a series of random, disconnected events, especially when we are going through hardship or suffering. When things don't make sense and when we can't see the purpose behind our pain, it can be difficult to find hope. But the truth is, even in these moments when everything feels meaningless, God's plan is always perfect. Even when we feel lost, God is at work in our lives and his plan continues to unfold in ways that we might not immediately understand. It is through faith and trust in his perfect timing that we can find meaning in the midst of our struggles and find hope that will carry us through the most challenging times. When we face difficult times, especially when things seem to fall apart, it's easy to feel like we're being punished or that God has forgotten about us. We might wonder why bad things happen to us or why life seems so unfair. But the Bible reminds us that God's plan is perfect even when it doesn't make sense to us. Isaiah 55:8-9 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." God's plan for our lives is much greater than what we can understand in the moment. Our human perspective is limited, and we don't always see the bigger picture. But God in his infinite wisdom knows what is best for us. He is working in every situation, even when things seem hopeless or unclear. Every trial, every disappointment, and every difficult moment is part of his plan to bring us closer to him and shape us into the people he has created us to be. It's not always easy to see this, especially when we're in the middle of hardship, but we can trust that God is at work in every part of our lives and his plan is always good. Even in the darkest times when it seems like everything is lost, we can trust that God is still working in our lives. His perfect plan is unfolding in ways that we might not understand yet. But in time we will see how he has been guiding us, shaping us, and preparing us for what is ahead. There is purpose in everything, and even the most painful experiences can bring us closer to God and help us grow in ways that we couldn't have imagined. One of the key elements to finding faith and hope in God's plan is developing unshakable faith and hope. No matter how unstable life feels, we can find solid faith in God. When the world feels unpredictable and the future seems uncertain, we can hold fast to the belief that God is with us and that he is always working for our good. When we face challenges, whether they are small or life-changing, we can find comfort and hope in God's presence and his promise that he will never leave us or forsake us. Unshakable faith means trusting God even when things are uncertain or difficult. It means believing that he is with us even when we don't feel his presence. It means knowing that God has a purpose for everything we go through, even when we can't see the purpose right away. As we seek his guidance in our struggles, he provides us with peace that surpasses understanding, and he fills us with hope that helps us press on. Psalm 34:18 says, "The Lord is close to the broken-hearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." This verse reminds us that even in our most painful moments, God is near. He is close to us in our suffering, and he will never abandon us. He is with us in the valley, and he will bring us through to the other side as we trust him. He gives us the strength to endure and the hope that he is working all things for our good. Faith and hope are not always easy, but they are essential to overcoming life's challenges. When we trust in God's plan, even when we don't understand why things are happening, we find peace and hope that carry us through the most difficult seasons of life. By leaning on God and seeking his guidance, we can experience his comfort and find strength to face whatever comes our way. Let me share a story of someone who went through a challenging period in their life and later realized that the struggles helped them grow in faith and strength. This is a story about someone close to me, a woman named Sarah. Sarah had a successful career, a loving family, and a comfortable life, but everything changed when she suddenly lost her job. She had been working for years in a position she loved, and the unexpected loss left her feeling devastated. She didn't know what to do next, and she felt like her whole world had come crashing down. In the beginning, Sarah struggled with feelings of hopelessness and fear. She didn't understand why this had happened to her, and she couldn't see how it could be part of a bigger plan. But as time went on, Sarah turned to God in her pain and began seeking His guidance. She prayed, and slowly she began to feel peace. Despite the uncertainty and the challenges, Sarah trusted that God had a plan for her even if she couldn't see it yet as she prayed. She started to receive new opportunities, and through her time of waiting, she discovered a deeper passion for helping others in her community. Looking back, Sarah realized that the job loss, though painful, was part of God's plan to help her grow in her faith and redirect her toward a new purpose. Through the experience, she learned to trust God in ways she never had before. She learned that God's plan was not always about comfort and stability, but about growth, transformation, and trust. Even when she didn't understand why things were happening, Sarah learned to rely on God and trust that He was working all things together for her good. If you're currently facing a difficult time, I encourage you to be patient and trust in God's plan for your life. Every challenge you face is a chance for you to grow in faith and trust in Him. It might not make sense right now, but God is at work even in the most difficult situations. His plan for your life is unfolding, and He is using every experience, every trial to shape you and prepare you for what is ahead. When you don't understand why something is happening, remember that God's ways are higher than our ways, and His thoughts are higher than ours. Trust that He sees the bigger picture, and even if you can't see it now, He's working all things together for your good. Keep your faith in God even when things are uncertain, and know that He is with you in every moment. As you trust in His plan, you will find peace, hope, and strength to carry on through every season of life. Remember, unshakable faith is not about understanding everything perfectly, but about trusting that God's plan is good and that He is always working for your benefit. Even when life feels meaningless or difficult, God's plan is always perfect, and He will bring you through stronger and more faithful than before. Trust in Him, seek His guidance, and know that He is with you every step of the way. Finding faith and hope in God's plan, especially when life feels meaningless or difficult, is a process. It requires trust in God's timing and faith that He is at work, even when we don't understand why things are happening. Through every challenge, God is refining us and shaping us into the people He has created us to be. Keep trusting Him, keep seeking His guidance, and know that He will never leave you. He is always at work, and His plan for your life is good. As we come to the end of today's message, let's take a moment to reflect on the key points we've discussed. Loss and challenges are part of God's plan for our lives. It's natural to wonder why we face hardship, why we experience loss, or why life sometimes feels uncertain. But the truth is, these struggles are not in vain. God uses them to shape us, strengthen us, and help us grow in ways that are often beyond our understanding. Even when we don't understand why things happen, we can trust that God is still working. Sometimes we may not immediately see the purpose behind our pain or struggles, but God is always at work behind the scenes, bringing about something greater in our lives. We can trust that He is working all things together for our good. Trusting in God's plan helps us find peace and hope even when everything feels meaningless. Life may feel overwhelming at times, but when we place our trust in God's plan, we can find a sense of peace that surpasses our understanding and hope for the future, knowing that God is in control. No matter how difficult the road may seem, remember that God always has a good plan for you, and in every trial, He is preparing you for something greater. Life may not always unfold the way we expect or want it to, but we can have confidence that God's plan is far greater than our own. He knows the way forward, and even in the darkest moments, He is preparing us for something beautiful and meaningful. Trusting in His plan doesn't mean everything will be easy, but it means that we can rest in the knowledge that God is with us, guiding us and leading us toward a future full of hope and purpose. If you feel that God's path for you is becoming clearer, don't hesitate to share your thoughts with us in the comments. We would love to pray for you and walk this journey together with you. Remember, you're not alone in this. God is with you, and so is this community of believers who are here to support you and encourage you on your path. If you found this video helpful, please take a moment to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more videos on faith and trusting in God's plan. Together we can continue to support each other and grow in our trust of God, knowing that His plan for us is always good and filled with hope. Thank you for being part of this community, and I look forward to walking this journey with you as we trust in God's perfect plan for our lives.